When I was a kid making simple games in the 90s, I didn't even know what a game engine was. Most people probably didn't. So fast forward to 2010, when I wanted to make a more substantial game, it was partly a matter of habit that I built my own engine from scratch. This was also a different time. There weren't as many good options as there are today. But I learned a lot. There are some serious drawbacks to doing everything myself. There's a time cost, debugging, and worst of all, when people wanted a Linux port, I had no idea how to do that. I'd only done Windows and DOS development before. So for my next game, I decided to use a pre-existing cross-platform engine. I looked at the two biggest names first, Unreal and Unity. What frustrated me about both of them was how much the tutorials focused on building levels with drag and drop. What if I wanted a procedurally generated world? As a programmer, I just wanted to know how my code interacts with the engine. How do I spawn new objects? How do I store game state that I can access from different scenes? Ultimately, I found those answers more easily for Unity than Unreal, so that's what I started with. I spent a few months prototyping a game called Galaxy Unknown in my spare time. This is where I ran into a few issues with Unity. I encountered several bugs, especially with UI components, that were known and later fixed, but every time I updated to get bug fixes, something else would break. It was also really frustrating for a pixel art game, because I would place objects at very precise coordinates in a scene, and later they'd shift to a small fraction of a pixel off for no obvious reason. This was all a couple of years ago, so I'm not sure what's been improved since then, but the consensus online still seems to be that Unity is not ideal for pixel art games, and that it often suffers from bugs. Because it's closed source, we're at the mercy of the developers to fix them. Fast forward again to December of 2018, and I'm working on a new prototype of a new game. I'm sure I could use Unity and work around whatever issues I encounter, but I wanted to try something different. Since I'm prototyping a relatively simple 2D game, I thought Gamemaker Studio might be a good fit. At first it was really promising, less clutter from features I don't need, and good tutorials for its proprietary programming language called GML. But before long I hit two major deal breakers. First, GML has no concept of structs or classes. I thought there must be some alternative, but the best solution I could find from extensive Googling was to use associative arrays and enums to index into them. For those less programming savvy, let's just say it's a really ugly solution. I might have been willing to put up with it if not for the other deal breaker. I left a virtually empty project running on my MacBook for a few hours, and when I came back the CPU fan was going crazy. This simple GameMaker project was throttling my CPU for no discernible reason. I could only assume there was some type of leak or other bug in the Mac version of Gamemaker Studio, and if it was this bad now, it would surely be worse with a finished game. Oh yeah, and one more thing. Gamemaker doesn't provide any UI components like text boxes or scroll bars, so if you want those, you'll have to code them yourself. That can be really time-consuming. So it was back to the drawing board, and I decided to take another look at Unreal. It's such a popular choice, there must be a reason, right? Plus, being able to work with C++ was a bonus for me because that's what I'd been doing in my day job for over 7 years. The learning resources are still awful for a programmer. I still find it very difficult to get answers to what I consider the most basic questions, but I decided to power through it and spent 2 weeks learning Unreal. And here's why I decided to abandon it after those 2 weeks. First, if you're writing code in C++ and you make any mistake, the editor just crashes. And it keeps crashing until you fix your mistake and recompile outside of the editor. It doesn't give you a call stack, it doesn't give you anything to help you narrow down the problem. I googled this trying to find any tips, any ways to help debug this type of issue. Instead of a solution, I found other people frustrated with Unreal, and the more I read, the more I agreed with their other complaints. Unreal is really an FPS engine that can be used for other things, but it's not designed for that. It's also overkill for the type of game I'm trying to make. There's more bloat in the executable than just about any other engine. So it was back to the drawing board yet again. I started looking for lists of game engines and researching ones I'd never heard of before. After reading up on pros and cons and as many comparisons as I could find, I finally settled on Godot. It checked all the right boxes. Cross-platform, lightweight, great for pixel art games but also capable of 3D, a good set of UI components, and multiple programming languages to choose from. Plus it's both free and royalty-free, and open source. That means if I find a bug or don't like how something about Godot works, I can just change it. Best of all, the documentation was a dream come true. And one day I understood programming for Godot better than I did with Unreal after 2 agonizing weeks. At first I thought I'd be using C++, but Godot script was so easy to learn I'm just sticking with that. I've only been using Godot for about a week now, but I've made a lot of progress on my prototype, and so far I love it. That's why I really wanted to make this video, because sometimes the big names that everyone hears about aren't the best choice. Unreal and Unity have large marketing budgets behind them, and Godot doesn't. Whether or not it's the right choice for you, I encourage all indie developers to go look at the less prominent options. You might just save yourself time, stress, and money. I hope this has been helpful, and thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more of my game development journey and what I'm working on, please consider subscribing.